So surprise, I'm back. I was going to do the thing where I was going to wear what Chris is wearing, the consultant saying things hoodie, and then take it off to like differentiate. But anyway, I figured that was just faff, so I wouldn't do that.
And I'm sitting between the two of you, which, you know, feels odd being here in person rather than virtually.
Yeah.
But it's good.
Yeah. Well, look, thanks both. And thank you, Grant and Chief Architect Network for having us. I am doing the thing I don't normally do. I'm normally not scripted. Don't worry, I'm not going to be reading off the page. But given I've obviously jumped into different podcast mode, I needed some prompts to sort of remind me of what we're talking about. So yeah, thank you, Grant. Thank you, Cam, for having us. Thanks for everyone for coming. I felt the need to slightly reintroduce myself because for the last nearly 4 years I've been working for a consultancy that I'm no longer working at. So I've now actually recently struck out on my own. So I now run something called Cronk Advisory, and I'm very much working on a lot of things that have been talked about this morning around pragmatic architecture, continuous sort of adaptive governance architecture, and these things I'm calling pragmatic ecosystems and dynamic ecosystem architecture. And like I say, it builds on a lot of the conversation we've been having already. And it combines my passion for sustainability and my passion for technology. So if you want to talk to me more about that later on, I'm happy to talk to you. But speaking of ecosystems, what's amazing about this group of three of us is I'm sat here with two people who are very much part of the Architect Tomorrow ecosystem. And back in 2023, when Whynde launched her book, we had, I think it was on Zoom, but we had the four of us. There was another as well. But it's beautiful symmetry that we now have Whynde back talking to Lisa about her new book, Whatever Next, and the concepts within the book. So thank you both for coming back. And so so the tables have turned. So let's just do some quick intros for those that aren't familiar. So let's start with you, Whynde.
Just briefly, I'm really passionate about end-to-end strategy to execution, that muscle to adapt and change and help organizations to build that, underpinned by the discipline of business architecture. So Business Architecture Guild co-founder, author of Strategy to Reality, co-author of a book, Execution Challenge, and I'll leave it at that.
At least you've got an amazing career history, but which it's probably quite hard to sort of do an elevator pitch version of that. But if you can try and like give us a quick intro, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I'm Lisa Woodall, and I'm just getting used to saying I'm an author of Whatever Next. That's a very new thing in my career. But, you know, previously, for the 30 years before that, I was working in transformation. I was working in transformation in insurance companies, in Ordnance Survey, and then into the major marketing organization of the world, WPP. And it's that experience that has made me really reflect and think on what makes transformation a success. And, you know, I've outsourced, I've offshored, I've centralized, I've migrated systems, you know, from the legacy 1980s to the now 2010s, 2020s. And I've been in rooms and had discussions and been in our ARBs. And all of that comes together in my book, Whatever Next.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And so, you know, that experience, particularly the sort of blogging that you did for about a decade, so that's like crazy number of words, crazy number of posts, like over 150 posts. What was the moment where you went, do you know what, this could be a book? What was that sort of realization?
Well, it's absolutely brilliant you mentioned the blog, because that blog came pre-AI. It was just my responses to what I was seeing happening either at work or on LinkedIn, and stuff that Whynde was posting about was triggering me to think about, you know, what do I really think about that? And stuff that, Ollie, you were posting about was making me think about that. And I just was blogging, just getting my thoughts down, publishing it on the internet and seeing what conversations came as a result of it. And as you said, Ollie, there's 156 posts, there were 100,000 words, and I thought something in this must make a book. I mean, I sat with you, Whynde, we talked about your book. That inspired me. I mean, I love the business architecture side of your book, and I thought there is something in all this lived experience which I can bring together and maybe help everybody in the technology world of enterprise architecture think a bit differently, think about being more human and more honest, because that was conversations that I was hearing in the corridors, but I wasn't hearing in the technical discussions that were happening. And that was coming through my blog posts and my reflections when I look back over those 5 years of blogging.
And so as much as this is a great book, it's really these sort of lenses that, and the sort of, I suppose, the way we can use those to lead and challenge and perhaps become more human in the transformation and not forget about that sort of people change. Sometimes it's inconvenient, isn't it, to kind of get people to kind of agree or to kind of transform and do things differently. But ultimately, it's a vital part of making transformation stick, right? And so perhaps walk us briefly through the 5 lenses of reflect, reimagine, reframe, rewire, and reconnect.
I would love to walk you through them, but I'd prefer you brought the book
I love it. Well,
and read about them and read about them.
I'm not going to tell you.
I read about them, but broadly, the concepts behind the lenses are: it's not a framework, it's not a process. It's just stepping back sometimes as architects, stepping back from the technical diagrams, stepping back from the technical conversations, and reflecting on why we are where we are. We've got a legacy estate for a reason. People that came before us have made the decisions based on the context at the time and made the decisions that they made about the technology we have. So it's very much reflecting. Then absolutely in our trade as enterprise architects, we look to the future, we look to the target state, and we reimagine what that future could be. And again, reflecting on what that could be, giving the space for that reimagining the possibilities, that's really key and important. And then we move into sort of the lens of, reframing. There's loads of things that we've done in the past. There's loads of things we could do in the future. But what is really pertinent to the business right now? What are the strategic objectives? What are we trying to hit? And how can we reframe that? And then rewire, if you get the book, if you read the book, the rewire chapter is our core lens. That's where we all spend most of our time. We are rewiring people, we're rewiring processes, we're rewiring technology. I mean, Ollie, you were part of that chapter. We talked about sustainability.
Yeah.
Whynde, you get a big mention in that chapter because it's all about business architecture. So that rewiring aspect, I think you'll all resonate with probably more than the others, because the others take us out of our comfort zone. And I sort of conclude with reconnect, which is the comfort zone that I think we need to come out of technically and into that human side and reconnect with the people that we're really here for. I mean, we can talk about AI, we can talk about cloud, we can talk about blockchain. I remember we've all forgotten that, but that was a hype thing. That was a hype thing, all of that. But why are we doing all of this stuff? We're doing it for people. And it's actually what shows up in that technology and how we reconnect with the people we're serving. And many people have started the book. Majority of people have finished the book, but there are a few that haven't got to that chapter. And it's that reconnect chapter that is the most important in the whole book.
It is vital, isn't it? Because otherwise the danger is we're in our echo chambers getting really excited about tech, but we're not bringing people on that journey. And so, Whynde, I wanted to talk to you about your endorsement, because you say that Lisa challenges us to design with intent and coherence across functions, discipline, and time. And given the sort of connections to strategy to reality, what does the book add, do you think, to the conversation that was missing?
I think this book has never been more important than right now. Just to echo, I think, a number of things that you're saying. There's so much detail and so much change, architectural, technical, delivery, AI, and this book really lifts us up. It gives us permission, it gives us space, as you said, it gives us the reminder to really take that reflection that we need to do on an ongoing basis. Is where we're going still the right place to go, right? Where are we? Does that still make sense? The reimagine, I think, is important. Like, are we thinking about the future in the right way, in the most, the biggest possible way we can imagine? And like you say, the reconnect, the human side is also so important. So this book to me really brings us back to 2 things: intent and human.
And can I add a bit more to that? When some people have read the book, they think, we've got enough on our plates to look at the technical side. To bring the technical challenges into our role is hard enough. To keep up with the technical trends, is impossible for anyone or any team. And now, Lisa, you're suggesting we also need to embrace the human side more. I'm sort of saying that, but I'm also saying get out and include those people in your teams more than you do today. You'll have solution architects, you'll have enterprise architects, you'll have infrastructure architects, but when you're sitting in the ARB boards, when you're sitting in the architecture design sessions, who in the room is really representing the business? And I'm not talking about the business sponsor. I'm talking about who in the room has the expertise, the knowledge, the deep-rooted understanding of the business that you can use to reflect on it. And, you know, when I started, it's a shame Jenny from Kingfisher
I'm literally
isn't
about to
still
mention
here,
Jenny, but
because
yeah.
she started as a business analyst, and we were talking this morning about how the business analysts have often been underrepresented. And, you know, the business architecture side, you know, the business architecture, the business analysts need to be in the room. Or if they're not in the room, someone that can really bring the voices that we're not hearing, because otherwise it is an echo chamber.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying we need to all develop the skills to be more human-centered. I'm saying make sure you're opening your ears and your eyes to people that can bring that specialism into your teams.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Jenny, because I saw Jenny Wilson, who was with us until just now, had to run off for a board meeting. She talked on another podcast episode of Architect Tomorrow, talking about architects as being enablers, not gatekeepers. And I think the Reconnect lens in the book kind of allows us to sort of address that head on somewhat.
Yeah, and I mean that Reconnect chapter is the one that probably represents the last part of my career at WPP. That was when I was out there looking at how to deploy the digital workplace in a more human-centered way.
Yep.
And I was lucky to have a researcher on my team, you know, talking about bringing in different skills. She was a researcher of behaviors, and we sort of touched on a bit of that this morning. So she wasn't from a researcher of the business or technology. It was very much about human behaviors. And she really showed up and demonstrated for me the power of a day in the life of actually getting out into the organization, watching what people are doing, listening to what people are saying, seeing what they were thinking before they opened their laptop, what their sort of impressions were when they were using their laptop, and what they did at the end. You can't capture that in a requirements document. You actually have to get out there, you have to spend time observing and just see the behaviors.
Yep.
And even if you just do that once a year, just get out there once a year and see what people are experiencing in their work, in their day job, in the high streets. I think you'd think about your technology challenges differently. I know I did.
So I want to move us on to the reframe lens and to you, Whynde. So there's a lot in here about surfacing the unsaid. So things like, in a room full of senior architects, chief architects, how you get people to name the uncomfortable truths. And so I wanted to kind of talk to you, Whynde, about where do you see the emotion and politics derailing the best designed sort of architectures and strategies?
And to quote one of the things you say in the book, Lisa says, how change feels to people matters as much as what it does. I don't think we spend nearly enough time, and also too late, focusing on that change, right? But I, to answer your question, Oliver, I think there's a couple places where that gets introduced. One is when we don't create real, authentic forums and spaces for people to dialogue and ask questions and sort of voice what they're thinking. Lisa, you kind of talk about the iceberg, and when you don't have that, all that stuff is sort of lurking below the surface, right? Sometimes change management, even when we do it, it feels very very mechanical, right? Like we're going through steps. So like that real authentic forum. The other place I think we have challenges is the organizational structures and motivations of leaders, which can create really siloed political decision making. That's a bigger issue, but I think it happens there too.
I'm glad you brought up the sort of siloed piece, because I think this is where some of the discussions we've had on the podcast about ecosystems is really important, right? There's this fractal thing going on, I think, in architecture that we perhaps overlook, which is, we sit within teams that have an ecosystem. We sit then within a department. We then sit within an organization that has a set of ecosystems. Then we sit in a business ecosystem. So I think there's a whole, and I think the thing about AI and the sort of accelerated pace changes, all of those things are disrupting the ecosystem in different ways that we need to tune into. And often they're not just because of technology, they're because of the human response to some of those things. So when we think about rewiring how organizations work, we can't ignore those ecosystem dynamics, right, Lisa? So you then sort of talk a bit about this in your rewire lens, don't you, like going beyond the enterprise boundary?
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating, isn't it? In enterprise architecture, we've often been at the forefront of designing the new organizations, what we're going to outsource because it's not our core competency, where that should be placed around the world, offshore maybe, which platforms we're going to bring in from major vendors, Salesforce, ServiceNow. That is all part of an ecosystem. And even this morning, before the event, we were talking about the design of our organizations. And for me, listening, I felt that felt very internal to the organizations we sit in. And actually, it's not about designing for our organization. It's about designing for the ecosystem that we sit within and being sure of the consequences, not just for us, our teams, our processes and our systems, but also for the teams, processes and systems of the organizations that are part of our supply chain, because they're often thought of last. I mean, to your point, when you bring these people in, it's when you're going live with something. And that ecosystem and how that all fits together all has to work seamlessly for us to design the best organizations. So that ecosystem is really important.
So I'm going to quote someone else from a previous episode as well. So Ron Kersick, who I know is a mutual friend of ours. Do go and check out Ron. He does featuring architectures. And yeah, on the episode we talked about featuring architectures, put the teeth back in, featuring architectures. He talked about it's not your ecosystem. You cannot build it, you cannot design it, but you can design your position. So you can make choices about how you position yourself in that ecosystem. And it's a different way of thinking, isn't it? And this sort of transformation is something you live rather than, something that's always within your control.
Yeah, and I think, that was, if I look back, and I'm sure many of you, if you really look back over the last 20 or 30 years of the work you've been doing, you will recognize those conversations, those meetings that happened, those post-implementation reviews maybe, that would have highlighted the engagement of stakeholders early or too late. And it's often those ecosystem stakeholders that we've involved too late. And I think the other thing, going back to the iceberg that Whynde, you mentioned, was we're enterprise architects. We join the dots. We see things that other people in the organization don't see because we have the privilege to work across the silos. Yeah. Yeah. We are also in a position where we can go deeper. We can pick up the signals that maybe others aren't picking up because we're not as siloed in our thinking. And I think the real message for us to be more human and more honest in transformation is to turn the volume up on those signals, those hunches, that intuition that you're getting, and pay more attention to that, because you'll find that you'll be working with your team better, your team will be designing better solutions, and more importantly, you'll probably find the engagement with the stakeholders that are ultimately paying for everything are actually more brought in to it because you come across more human too.
And I wanted to bring in the other ecosystem that's often ignored, right? And increasingly in our worlds that are incredibly digitized and virtualized and abstracted from the real world, there's another set of ecosystems that we need to think about. We touched a little bit on human, the human dimension. There's this human societal ecosystem, right, that all of our organizations play into. And then obviously underpinning everything is the natural ecosystem that so conveniently often we try and ignore. And we are fundamentally all part of that natural ecosystem. Techno-optimists sort of amazing visions to perhaps upload our minds to the cloud or something apart. Fundamentally we can't ignore that. And I think we're going to sort of start facing into some fundamental limits to some of the technological progress that we are getting very excited about. Like, there are only so many data centers we can build around the world. There's only so much energy that we can, not even generate, like distribute it from generation to where the data centers are. So, fundamentally, so ecosystem thinking is also starting to think about what are the ripple effects of some of these decisions. Now, maybe it's not an individual project that's going to make the difference, but collectively as architects, we're making all these choices and these decisions that fundamentally impact sort of sustainability in its broader sense. And so, Whynde, I know this is something that you and I are both passionate about. And so where perhaps do you see some of the ability to kind of use some of this sort of language to try and get broader sort of understanding of what the consequences are of some of our architecture and strategy choices?
Yeah. I mean, the business architecture, in fact, quoting the Guild, a business architecture represents the scope of an organization and the ecosystem in which it operates, right? That's not me, that's overall.
Yep.
But I think those constructs are easily extensible. And they give us that view because we can then understand what are the implications. For example, something like a value network showing the interplay between our organization and third-party providers, right? And the value that's exchanged, we can use the same construct and map on it materials and energy.
So
right,
like
to
circular
get-
economy sort of type thinking.
Exactly. And also, extending a value stream. And if we're a bank, instead of having acquire loan, like working with partners to make it acquire home, and then that same value stream capability construct is getting people to really work together.
Ollie, it sounds as if you need to write a book.
Yeah.
You touched on sustainability in
Yeah.
my book, and
Yeah.
I don't claim to be in that space at all, but there's enough between what you two have both said
Mm.
that Whynde's written a book. I've written a book.
I can see where
I
you're going. I can
think
see where you're
it's time
going
you
now.
write the book.
See where you're going.
I think it's
Yeah, I
time
mean,
you
I ultimately that I'd love to do that, and I think there's, with the experience I've gained from talking to the amazing network and community that Architect Tomorrow has now become over the last 6 years that we've been running it, just like drawing on everyone's, it's a bit like what Grant was saying about Kuehn, right? Like you just become so much smarter by talking to smart people from different parts of the world and different industries. And I think there's definitely, I guess the benefit of going on this journey is, as much as the enterprise architect looks across the organization and sees where there's silos and where there's gaps, in my work I've been doing the last few years, I've been able to see the gaps between industries and the potential for, Jeremy sat in the room here, and Jeremy from Dear Smith, and one of the amazing things that we talked about a few months ago is like looking at industrial heat and, or data center heat. Could we take some of the stuff we're doing with servers and like be cleverer about the kind of waste heat and stuff like that? Some of this thinking that we're applying in our day-to-day operations to be more sustainable, we can totally look at the tech world as well, like kind of reimagining what waste is. Well, actually waste is an opportunity to perhaps monetize and create a circular economy sort of stream for the business. It's just different thinking. And so that's what's been really exciting for me. And I think if I do write a book, it will be about pulling those sort of threads together around kind of how do we think broader than just, because we do have a danger of having silos, not even just within departments and companies, but silos within industries that aren't kind of working enough with each other. And to solve the big problems that we're facing, we're going to have to get more creative, I think. Cool. Do we have any, Grant, I'm just looking at you for time. We've got about 5 minutes or so, is that right? Yeah. So I'd love to open up to the audience at this point, questions either to Lisa about the book or anything else that we've kind of
Well,
talked
the
about.
question did come in online, which was, could our two authors, soon to be three,
God.
nudge, wink, but do it, compare and contrast your two novels, right? They came out within about a month of one another. Let's share a little bit
No, I
about
would
them.
correct that. They came out 2 years
The internet
apart.
said it was a month ago, so it was
Uh,
a month ago. I'm sorry, a month between each other. That's what they said.
No, that's
But it-
2022 for Whynde, and so yeah, about 3 years difference. So that's someone perhaps using an LLM to give them a question. But anyway, I also noticed Darryl. It's great to see Darryl on screen. He's been commenting and everything. Darryl is one of the co-hosts of Architect Tomorrow going forward. That was a recent announcement. So, but yeah, but maybe the question about compare and contrast between the two books would be a good one to talk about.
Okay, I'll go first. So I had the pleasure of reading Whynde's book before I wrote mine. And I really liked the fact that it really brought alive business architecture and the importance of business architecture to drive home strategy execution. And some of the approaches to how you can set up business architecture, what works, what doesn't work, and the importance of driving that execution home. That's what I would say I took from Whynde's book. My book is more a lived experience. It's more someone's reflections on living through the last 30 years of transformation and some of the stories that I personally tell about some of the programs and projects I've worked on. So mine's more of a lived memoir. And I think Whynde's would be more of the go-to book for business architecture in strategy execution.
I can't say anything better. It's like they're companions, right?
If I could add woot woot, that's helpful. I hope that's helpful.
But do we have any questions in the room?
Yes, we have one right here.
Charles.
Charles
Cool.
Betts.
Yep. You want me on camera, huh? Sure.
It's an exclusive. I've got Charles Betts on Architect Tomorrow, everyone. This is
Not
great.
sure if I'm going to get through there safely without taking the camera down. Where should I stand? All right.
Yeah.
So in terms of, I think a lot of us are thinking about human in the loop and thinking about maintaining human intent in these increasingly AI-infused architectures. And the name that keeps coming to mind is Lisanne Bainbridge. And the paper is Ironies of Automation. Familiar?
We're going to add that to my reading list for sure. Sounds good.
Yeah, that's one to look at because she, UK human factors thought leader in datamation in 1960s, proposed that there was a fundamental issue with the idea that we will automate and then leave humans in the loop to handle the most critical issues, because the human starts to lose focus, lose context, and just at the moment the automation breaks, the human is unprepared.
This is like the self-driving car thing, right? Where all of a sudden you're handed over control and it's like, what? I now need to drive?
And this was exactly, there was a flurry around this with the Boeing 737 MAX, which was absolutely the perfect example of the situation. So I'm wondering if from a business architecture perspective, there's any thoughts on this, if you've started to work on these kinds of things or look at them?
So I think human in the loop is vital for all the reasons that we've talked about this morning. And I think I can't necessarily answer the question, but what I can say is enterprise architects have a role to play in slowing down maybe some of the hype and potential that AI could deliver, to allow that human side to catch up. And enterprise architects could, I'm not saying they will, but they could fuel it to move faster, the technology to move faster than those humans that we're delivering for can keep up. So I think we've got a role to play in slowing down the speed of the technology and helping our colleagues, our customers also embrace it. The figures this morning, 1.5 trillion being spent on AI. How much of that is going into the technology side of bringing AI in, and how much of that is going into that human capability side? I would probably say it's 98% on the technology and 2% on the human side. And I think we've got to correct that, or we're in danger of what you're actually declaring there.
So I'd love to signpost before I hand to you, Whynde, is like the sleepwalking risks sort of thinking, particularly augmentation fatigue, right? We talk a lot about humans being in the loop, but imagine a story where it becomes almost like a factory production line where you're staring at the production line looking for the anomaly. How interesting are some of these roles when you take the friction out? Like there was a really interesting post recently about someone talking about software engineering. How interesting is it essentially to debug the code that comes out of an AI rather than actually get the dopamine hit from doing the coding yourself in the first place? So there's some really interesting things here that we aren't thinking about because we're just looking at the immediate, oh, this is amazing. We're not taking a step back and going, well, hang on, what happens to my team and their skills and their desire to kind of actually engage in the work if we've taken out the bit that actually was the most exciting?
And I think that's the whole point of the lenses too. There's a lot of things we can do, and this conversation is so focused at a micro level, honestly, that we need to come up and say, macro, does this make sense where we're going?
Grant, how are we doing?
Very good. Yeah, I think we can claim success.
Cool. I'll wrap us up then quickly.
What's that?
I'll just wrap us up quickly.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. So look, thanks everyone. Thanks for listening and turning. And if you like this, like I say, there are well over 60 episodes now on various different topics. Sustainability is often a big theme. Next week, we're going to launch something that I've been working with the community called the Regenerative Architecture Principles. About 11 or 12 principles that I think as architects we can start to think about and act as counterbalance to some of the narrative around some of the topics we've been talking about today, around kind of making sure it's the well-balanced sort of future that we're building. So yeah, an Architect Tomorrow is like I say, all about learning from really smart people, not always architects, different adjacent roles, different disciplines. And so, yeah, if you've enjoyed this, do check that out. And increasingly, we'll be popping up places like Cannes and other events. So, yeah, thank you very much again, Grant, for having us.
And thank you. I mean, we're trying something new here. It doesn't work perfectly, but I think pretty damn good. 70 people online agree.
Awesome.
4 out of 5 dentists. There's the one that's just a little picky.
And yeah,
But
and
hey,
thanks,
we'll
thanks,
take
thanks,
it.
thanks for joining.
Beautiful job, folks. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for kicking us off.
Thank you.
So now, because